So welcome to week 2 of our Be Generous campaign. In case you don't know what Be Generous is, let me remind you or fill you in. Be Generous is our opportunity to be generous to the community in which we find ourselves. It's our opportunity to grow in generosity individually as well. It's our time to focus on generosity. Last week we looked at the generosity of God. The generosity of God. And I hope that kind of refreshed your soul. That helped you to know that God is not a Scrooge who owns it all and keeps it all to himself. God so graciously gives all things to us. We're created in the image of a generous God, and part of our being is it cries out to be generous. George Sweeting, a former president of Moody Bible Institute, said, "Seldom ignore a generous impulse." Generosity. This year, this is year 4 of Be Generous. And last week, I have a confession. I inaccurately reported to you the total. I was given a 2-year total for our Be Generous offerings, which was 13,000 plus. And then I got to thinking, no, this is year 4, so there should have been 3 years of accounting on that. And so I contacted the office in Granville and said, what was the 3 years? And so the total is over 18,000. In fact, it is $18,325.23 to date that you have given generously, that we have used to do several things. We have blessed, this is the annual thing that we've done every year, teens in foster care through the House of New Hope. We're going to do that again this year. We have helped a middle school incentive for middle school in Utica. We have helped Glory Rain Stables, which is right around the corner. How many of y'all have been to Glory Rain Stable, by the way, just to check it out? And Terry had a class there a couple weeks ago, and to see them in action with kids and how they relate the story of the horses and the kids that are clammed up and just somehow a horse has a way. God uses it to open their hearts and they come alive. And then kids can go back week after week for sessions with them. And so it's just an awesome place. We have helped the Licking County Food Pantry Network with donations in that. So we want to bless our community. It's our way to be generous where God gets the glory and the church gets the credit. And so that's important in our world because church is so often seen negatively, and we want to change the image that people have of church. So we don't set a giving goal. We never have set a giving goal. I personally, in my mind, set a participation goal. I'm praying for everybody to participate. Everybody to participate. And that everybody will give sacrificially over and above what they normally would give. And I've asked you last week, and I'll say it again this week, and if you do this is okay, no scolding, no guilt, no shame. But I would ask you, please don't take what you would normally give and then divide it in portions and give part of it to Be Generous. Challenge yourself to be generous and go over and above what you normally would do. I would encourage you to do that because we're created to be generously. And it's because and I'm going to share this with you next week, the paradox of generosity, it is by giving that we receive. It is by giving that we receive. So hold on to that thought. We'll explore it a little bit more next week. Now y'all know this. In the stories of The Grinch and A Christmas Carol, were the main characters happier at the beginning of the story or at the end? At the end of the story. That's kind of like, duh, that's why Dr. Seuss and Charles Dickens wrote those stories, right? So, and by the way, did you know that there are over 135 productions of A Christmas Carol? Including radio, that's been done since the early 1900s. Over 135. The most famous of which people that are characters that have played Scrooge. Can you name them? George C. Scott. Jim Carrey. And don't forget, Mickey Mouse, Mickey's Christmas Carol, right? So, yeah, how did you guys, you guys are showing your age. Anyway, here we go. I want to read a passage of Scripture from which the title of Be Generous comes. It's found in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. This is a document written by a guy by the name of Paul to a young pastor, kind of like, here's some things you need to know that are going to help you, they're going to encourage you in the ministry that he was doing. I believe it was in the city of Ephesus. And so Paul wrote to this young pastor named Timothy, and he says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life." So I'm going to tell you real quick, give you the kind of the outline for this message. Number one, the definition of rich. Number two, the danger of being rich. And number three, the delight of being rich. And by the way, let me just say this. We have a home group that meets on Tuesday nights, and you can ask questions about that later. And they are taking questions that relate to the scripture passage and the message every week. And this would be, if you're not a part of a home group, this would be a great time to join a home group on Tuesday nights. So you can just let me know, talk to Andy, talk to Vicki, talk to me. I'll point you to Andy and Vicki because it's their house. So they'll let you know the details on that. But we're trying an experiment where they're going to take questions that relate to the message every week and then discuss that in an open group format there. So the definition of rich. I hope when you walk out of here today, you will walk out of here feeling rich. Because you are. I believe that with all my heart. The definition of rich is when you have more than you need. When you have more than you need. Because there are people in this world that have less than what they need, and they consider every person in this room rich. And rich is a comparative term. Sure, when we look at the Bezoses and the Gateses and the Buffetts in the world, and we think about, the billions of dollars that they have, we look at ourselves, unless you're a secret billionaire, we look at ourselves and we go, boy, I am not rich. Well, they're just the super rich. They're just the super rich. I looked up some stats. There are 3 countries in the world where the annual income is less than $600 a year. A year. So, figure that out on a monthly basis there. So, having more than you need. Having more than you need. There is rich and there is super rich. And there is poor and then there is also super poor. And probably all of us fit into some. We're richer than some. And we're poorer, if you want to look at it like that, not as rich as others. But we've got to not think like that. Because we've got to ask ourselves questions. How rich do you have to be in order to be considered to be rich? How much of a surplus do you have to have in order to have more than you need? How many of us have way more than we need? How many Americans have an annual garage sale because they have more than they need? And they have another garage sale next year because they replenished what they gave away, what they sold, what they donated. And they have another. I've known families that do that every year and somehow manage to make hundreds of dollars on that. That's how rich do you have? How many storage units do you have to have? How many boxes in your basement that you haven't gone through in years do we have to have? In our basement, in our attic, in our garage, or at somebody else's house? How much do we have to have? How many articles of clothing, shoes do we have to have in our closets to be considered, I have way more than I need? One of the things I like about being rich is it makes me go through my closet and it makes me go through my chest of drawers and I start taking things out and donating them either to the Goodwill or the Lookup Center because it just makes me realize I've got more than I need. I've got way more than I need, and I don't want to just throw it away. I don't want to turn it into rags. I want somebody to be blessed by that. It also makes me aware of, there's not purchasing. Not purchasing stuff. If I ever had a project at home, my motto used to be, it's time to buy a new tool. That was my motto. It's time to buy a new tool. Not only buy the tools that I don't have, and I don't do very many projects anyway because I never hardly finish them. So I'm not I am mechanically declined, and I'm sticking with that. So how much? Ask yourself, how much surplus would you have if you didn't have any credit card payments? Ooh, look how quiet it got. Ooh, how much extra income would you have on a monthly basis without credit card payments? How much of that monthly payment have you forgotten even what you... How many boxes of Amazon delivery that come to your house that you think, what did I order? Has that happened to anybody? It's happened to me. Between the 5 of us that live in our house, Amazon visits us sometimes twice a day. I don't know why they can't figure it out, but it might be coming from, I don't know how that happens, but sometimes they come early in the morning and sometimes they come in the evening. And I just think, can't you guys get your act together? It's like, it'd save you some time and some money. How much stuff do we have that we rarely use? Are you feeling rich yet? Are you feeling rich? So there's a danger. There's a danger of being rich. Paul points that out in this passage of Scripture. Let me read 1 Timothy 6:17, where he says command. And that word command is a word that really means make an announcement. Make an announcement. It's not really, it's not like the pastor Timothy had authority over people in the church. No, that's cultish. No, the word means make an announcement. Timothy, I want you to pass this announcement on to the people that make up the fellowship of believers there in Ephesus. I want you to pass this along. Those who are rich in this present world, those who have more than they need, tell them to not be arrogant. So one of the first dangers of having more than we need is arrogance. It's prideful. He says not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So the danger of becoming prideful, arrogant. Do you know when that hits me? When I drive past that guy on the street corner. It's asking for money. You know what the first thing that used to go through my mind was? Why don't you go get a job? Isn't that arrogant? Isn't that arrogant of me to think that I know what their situation is? I thought, I just want to go get a job application because there's one right across from McDonald's, and just here's the application for McDonald's right across the street. How arrogant is that of me? Or to think, boy, I'm glad I don't live on the other side of those tracks, right? Isn't that prideful? Isn't pride and arrogance kind of like twins? They might be a little different, but they go hand in hand. They look a lot alike. The danger of that. Listen to Deuteronomy 8:17. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. And that pride and that arrogance tends to cause us to forget where it came from. Who gave us the intellect? Who gave us the skill? Who gave us the ability? Ultimately, it's come from God. And it's come from the resources that we have in our country. And it's come from the resources that have been provided for us by our parents and the education. And what can we claim that we came up with on our own? It's prideful. It's arrogance to think that, man, we're self-made men. We're self-made women. That's prideful. That's arrogant. And God is reminding us that it is He that gave us the ability to produce the wealth. There's a danger also of a false hope. Jesus said that all treasures on earth could be lost, stolen, or lose their value. Now, we don't like to think about this, but it's true. I got my quarterly statement from my retirement account recently, the end of September. Looked at it with the realization, this is all just dependent on the market, right? It's dependent on the market. It could all go flat. And there's some years where it felt like it did, right? And, it could all. We could, it's all so uncertain. Jesus said this, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Now, he's not saying don't save, because there's other scriptures that talk about that talk about saving or not using up everything. A fool uses up everything that he has. It says in Proverbs, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy. So moths are going to eat the cloth, vermin. Rats can eat the grain, and we're talking about a culture where people, that's what they saved. That's what they accumulated. They didn't have, the local bank and a safety deposit box and those kinds of things. They had things stored up, in their house. So he says, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. It could all be lost, stolen, damaged, lose its value. I recently went through storage things in the closet and the cabinets back here, and some banners. Remember, we used to hang some banners up here. There was one of them that was related to Be Generous that some mice had chewed one of the bottom sections of it. Don't worry, I think we've gotten rid of the mice, but it was damaged, so I had to throw that away. And what Jesus' Scripture is telling us is to put our hope, our ultimate hope, in our wealth is foolish. It's foolish. Because if our ultimate hope fails, then we have no hope. So it's the danger of a false hope. It's also the danger of being lured away from God. Did you pick that up when we read that in 1 Timothy? Actually, earlier in 1 Timothy, I want to read you these verses 9 and 10. Those who want to get rich, they may think, I'm not rich, I'd like to be rich. I'd like to have way more than I currently have. Oh, really? There's a danger to that. Those who want to get rich, look at what Paul said, fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Now, he's not saying it's wrong to be rich, wealthy, super rich, and there's nothing holy about being rich and there's nothing unholy about being poor. That's not what this is saying. But he's saying if we have that desire, if our intent is get out and we want to make money and more money and we're pouring our heart into that and we're neglecting other things, it says that there's a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. How many families have suffered because the father, perhaps, the main breadwinner, was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. In his reasoning, it was because my family needs this standard of living. And what the family really needed was him. There's all kinds of things that begin to happen. Now look, in verse 10 it says, for the love of money, 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. This is one of the most misquoted verses in the Bible, by the way. Did you know that? Because most people quote it as, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not what it says. It says that the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. All kinds of evil. When resources are hoarded and people starve, that's evil. And people hoard resources, stockpile for themselves. It's evil. When other people are starving. The love of money is a root of all kinds of people. Now look at this. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Now in Paul's mind, what he's saying is the faith, our relationship with God, and our honoring Him. Paul obviously would say that is the most important part of our being. That's why we were created. And we work best. We function best when God is on the throne of our lives, the center of our being, and our lives revolve around Him. And yet when we allow something to take over and to sit on that throne, and it says that we wander from the faith and pierce ourselves with many griefs. And there's the danger of thinking those who have the most win. Those who have the most win. Luke 12. Maybe you're familiar with this. Someone in the crowd around Jesus one day said to him, "Teacher, Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Ever known of a family when somebody died and then, the inheritance is getting divvied up and there's division and arguing, and so that was apparently going on. And somebody said, hey, I'm going to pull Jesus into this. Probably his brother or his cousin was right there. Hey, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And Jesus basically said, I'm not getting involved in this. Jesus was wise. He said, man, who appointed me a judge and an arbiter between you? And then he said to them, so he took this opportunity to teach something very important. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Watch out. Have you watched out this week for greed? Have you watched out? We live in a greedy society. It's very materialistic. Very materialistic. How many commercials appeal to our sense of greed, our sense of wanting more? Wanting more. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So you may not have very many possessions and that you wished you did and your life would be better. Jesus' word to those who don't have very much is, that's not what life consists of anyway. And to those who have an abundance of possessions, he's saying, that's not the life. That's not what life is all about. Don't you wonder when somebody says, hey, I'm living the life, what does that mean? I get to take the vacations I want to take. I get to fly anywhere in the world I want to fly. I get to, rent the yachts and and it looks like they're living the life, and that's, the lights come on. Yeah. That always looks good on the video. All of a sudden there. Your life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And he told them this parable. He told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Like he got a raise. That year his crops produced a lot. And so he thought to himself, what shall I do? What should I do with this extra that I've got? I know. I have no place to store my crops, so I'm going to go rent a storage unit. No, I'm going to go build more barns, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. And we might think, so what's wrong with that? But God said to him, you fool, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Now listen to this. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. Whoever, anyone. That can include me, that can include you, that can include anyone listening to the sound of my voice. That's a warning in our very material. We live in the richest country in the history of the world. And don't think that materialistic air, don't think that we don't breathe it in. Don't think that it doesn't affect our thinking. And that's why we need reminders about what life really is meant to be all about. So how do you be rich towards God? How do you be rich? God is not impressed by the amount in your checkbook or savings account or retirement account, nor is he depressed by it. You might be, but God is not. How do we be rich towards God? He doesn't have a safety deposit box in heaven where we can send, checks ahead and say, here, God, but we can send it ahead. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But how do you be rich towards God? What does God care about? God cares about the advancement of his kingdom, and he cares about people. People. People are not tools. Things are tools. Things are to be used to bless people. Those are the things that God cares about. And the person that is rich towards God is a person that shares generously of their time, their ear, their resources, encouraging words, outpouring of love towards people around them, people that they know, and sometimes people that they don't even know. That's what God takes note of. That's what God pays attention to. Hey, I like that encouraging word that you gave, to that individual. I like the fact that you donated to that worthy cause. I like the fact that you're investing your life in the growth of another individual. You're investing in people. That's what it means to be rich towards God. Not to accumulate, build bigger barns, buy more storage units, or rent them. It's being rich towards God, investing in His kingdom and investing in people. In order to be generous, now you know this, you can't spend it all on yourself. In order to be generous, you cannot spend it all on yourself or stockpile it away. Goes without saying almost, doesn't it? There's a reason that miserable starts with miser. Yeah, when you get that, you can laugh. Psalm 61:10 says, though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. Now what I would pray for each one of us, that our riches would increase. Because our generosity is increasing. God tends to give to people who give. I'll talk about this more next week. There's some half-truths to the wealth and health gospel. Half-truths. And I hope to make that clear next week. And what the other half not truths are about that. There's enough truth in it to make it palatable. But God does tend to give to those who give. Good measure, pressed down. Not the box of cereal, like the box of cereal, when you open it up, you think, wow, it's only 3/4 full. Well, when they filled it up, it was full. It just in settling. God's saying, I'm going to pack it down. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to settle it in your resources. I'm going to give to those who give. The delight of being rich. The delight. Obviously, the delight does not consist in, or should not consist in, the accumulation of things. That should not be where our delight is. That should not be where our hope is. That should not be where we put our trust. It can all be taken away. It can all be lost. It can all be stolen. It can all lose its value. And the delight of being rich is this. There's a lot of ways you could come at this. And here it is. Number one, we are meant to be conduits, not containers. We are meant to be conduits. A conduit is something passes through. And one of the reasons that God gives us things is to give to people in need. One of the reasons we have a surplus, not the only reason, but one of the reasons we have a surplus is to give to people in need. God cares about the widows. God cares about the orphans. God cares about the people who are down on their luck. God cares about them. And it's meant to be the people of God that have more than enough, that are sharing with people that don't have enough. And maybe if the Church of Jesus Christ was doing more of that, we wouldn't have such a political outcry to take away from the wealthy and to steal from them. Here's my political statement. This is as political as I'm going to get. To take from those who, and forcefully take it away from them. That's not the way it should work. But the people of God should be giving generously, and towards the people that are in need. So, we're happier. I believe this with all my heart. We're happier as conduits. Remember, Jesus is quoted as saying in the book of Acts, it's not actually found in the Gospels, but it was a well-known saying that Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, when your parents quoted that to you as a kid, you thought they were out of their mind. Right? No. Every child thinking says, no, it's more blessed to receive than it is to give. And notice it doesn't say there's not a blessing in receiving. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say don't be blessed when you receive. You don't have to feel guilty when you receive. It doesn't say that at all. Jesus is not even indicating that. We all have received lots of things from people, and it's more blessed to give. That's a mature thought. That's part of growing up. That's part of realizing that what God has given to me, part of that is meant to be passed on. I'm a conduit through which it should flow. One of the reasons the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea is because the Jordan River flows into it and there's no outlet. There's no creeks, streams that flow out of it. You ever see a pond that gets scummy? A creek that gets blocked and the water gets blocked from flow? What happens? It gets scummy on top of it. It's because it's meant to be flowing. And you don't want to be scummy in your spiritual life. You want to be a conduit. You want the free flow of God's life through you. You don't want to just take it in. You want to have the free flow of God's life and His resources flowing through you. You take care of your family. You take care of the needs, and you take care of of people around you. Now, you don't have to be the answer to somebody's financial needs, but you can be a piece of the puzzle. You can be a piece of the puzzle. We're meant to be conduits, and we're happier as conduits because it's more blessed to give than to receive. And you know what research indicates? I'm going to share more of this with you next week. I've shared this with you in the years gone by. Research indicates this. People who are generous are happier and healthier. Isn't that interesting? People that are generous with their life. And I'm not just talking about money, but people who are generous with their life are happier and healthier. Wow. Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Do you need a time of refreshing? And you're hoping somebody will come by and refresh you? I hope that happens. But listen to what this says. If we go and refresh somebody else, guess what's going to come back to us? We're going to be refreshed. Isn't that interesting? And the economy of God, the way that He makes it work. You know, we talked about the generosity of God, and we're created in the image of God. And part of bearing the image of God is bearing His generosity. So I got some maybe words of advice. Enlist Jesus to be your investment manager. Enlist Jesus to be your investment manager. Say, Jesus, I got this portfolio of things. My bank account, my checking account, my savings account, my retirement account, what I've got in my pocket, what I've got in my safety deposit box. I'm going to make you, Jesus, my investment manager. How should I invest the money that you've entrusted to me? How should I invest? Now, Jesus, I believe this, has the best perspective of any investment manager in the world. Imagine yourself being at the end of the Civil War, and an investment manager said, "I think you should invest all your money in Confederate bonds." And you knew the war was going to come to an end and that the South was going to lose. Would you take that advice? No, you'd be buying Union bonds, right? No offense to any Southerners here. That may be, There's a perspective that Jesus has. And the perspective is, one day, this economy is going to end. One day, this economy will end. For me, it'll end when I die. Or when God decides, time's up, everything's over and done with, I'm pulling the plug, and boom, it's going to end one way or the other. And so why invest in things? Why make our major, most important investments in things that are not going to last? Okay, yeah. Command them to do good. This is what Paul wrote again, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. Look at this. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. You can invest in eternity. You can invest in eternity. God keeps records of what's done on behalf of His kingdom, on behalf of people. God keeps records of that. And not only is that for the pie in the sky by and by, so to speak, what about the here and now? What about the here and now? Well, Paul addresses that. So that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. I'm living the life. I'm living the life. It's well known that Mr. J.C. Penney gave away 90% of his income. I listened to an interview of Larry King with Rick Warren, pastor of the Saddleback Church in California. Rick gives away 90% of his income, and he lives on 10%. There's tremendous stories of extreme generosity in this world. Terry and I knew a couple in Alliance, Ohio, that when they needed a new furnace, they put in a coal-burning furnace because it was cheaper and less expensive in the long run, so that they could give to their church's missions program. Stories like that abound. Generosity. Terry, one of the great joys that we've had since we started, we've paid cash for our last few cars. You know what that's enabled us to do? To give away the car that we would have traded in and gotten some amount of value out of it. Give it away to somebody in need. We've done that a couple times. There's great joy in that. There's great joy in knowing somebody's in need and being able to write a check or make a donation to a worthy cause. Hurricanes that are hitting our country, and to know that Samaritan's Purse is first responders on the scene. As some of us have been there, have seen it happen, and know what it's like to either do the cleanup afterwards or rebuild. And to know that organizations such as Samaritan's Purse, and to be able to be generous and to have the resource because we haven't spent it all on ourselves. We haven't wasted on things that are going to perish eventually anyway. And to be able to get, that's part of the joy. That's part of the blessing of having more than you need. Having more than you need. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead, which is a quote from Randy Alcorn in his book, The Treasure Principle. So if you and I are going to take advantage of the challenge to live generously, seriously, to take hold of the life that is truly life, what do we need to do? Here's just some maybe long or short-term goals. Number one, start with, how about not accumulating new debt? Not accumulating new debt. You got that credit card application on the counter at home ready to go in? This might be a good time to not do it. Number two, start an emergency savings fund. Start an emergency savings fund. Dave Ramsey recommends starting with $1,000. You know what that $1,000 will keep you from doing? Using a credit card the next time the card breaks down. And then you're going to pay more in the long run on interest. What are credit cards running now? 21, 25%? Wow. And they want you to pay the minimum monthly balance, right? And just think of the interest that is accumulating on it. Think of how much more that $500 repair is going to cost you because you put it on a credit card. Significantly more. Start an emergency savings fund. Work towards paying off all current debt. It is possible. Terry and I set a goal to do that a long time ago. And it was in recent years that we finally got there. Our house will be paid off somewhere around January 2nd of 2021. And we will have zero debt. Zero. It is possible. You might have to have long-term goals. Give up some short-term goals. Have some long-term goals and work towards them. It is well worth it. I sound like Dave Ramsey right now, don't I? Anyway. No, he makes it more interesting than I do. So work towards paying off all current debt. Take control of your spending. Here's some thoughts. Stop justifying unnecessary expenditures. You may need to eat out less. You may need to make your coffee at home. $5 a shot at Starbucks? Ooh. Try Speedway coffee. Or Duke and Duchess coffee. Had to get that in. There we go. It's a lot cheaper than Starbucks. No offense, Starbucks. Take control of your spending. You may need to brown bag your lunch. Oh. Brown bag, how much money are you spending? Now you can say, I can afford it, I got it. Yeah, we got plenty, we got money in the bank. All these things. No. Let me just get serious with yourself for a moment. How much of that is keeping you from being more generous? How much of that is keeping you from being more generous than you currently are? I want to challenge you to up your generosity quotient. Now, some of you sat through these sermons, there's 4 of them every year, on be generous. And last year you felt guilty and you wished you could have given more. Take this simple advice that I just laid out seriously for the next year and see if you can't give more next year. Set some goals. Work towards it. Make yourself accountable to somebody. And work towards those goals. And live by this principle. What's interesting, if you go back and look at the YouTube analytics, one of the most watched sermons on our YouTube page was the one that was entitled Give, Save, Live. Give, save, live. Give first. Save second. Live. Base your lifestyle. Base the size of your mortgage payment. Base the kind of cars that you buy. Base your standard of living on 80% instead of 100. 10% giving, where Terry and I started that, she started that before we ever knew each other. We've lived by that when it was easy and when it was hard. I've lived that way for 44 years as a believer, and I have not one regret. Not one regret. And over time, you'll find yourself, if you look at your income tax statements, that you can have donated over time a considerable amount of money to the kingdom of God and to the people of God. It's worth it. That's an example of the life that is truly life. And I'm certainly not the sterling example by any means. But I'd encourage you to move in that direction. Whatever would prompt, whatever God would say to you, to move in that direction. And if you don't want to donate in a charitable organization and it's not this church, then find one that's worth giving to. This is not about raising money. This is not about generosity to this church. Although I do hope that happens. It's for you. The reality is God wants nothing from you. He wants everything for you. Let's pray.